The scorching summer sun beat down on Helena Sullivan as she clutched her father's pocket watch, its hands frozen at the moment of his death. The Wyoming Territory in 1878 was no place for a woman alone, but Helena had little choice after burying her father 3 days ago. Now, as she guided their wagon along the treacherous mountain path toward Silver Creek, her new home waited some 20 miles ahead if she survived the journey. "Steady now," Helena murmured to the pair of chestnut horses pulling her wagon. The animals' ears flicked nervously as they navigated the narrow trail carved into the mountainside. To her right, the path hugged the rocky face of the mountain. To her left, a sheer drop of at least 60 feet threatened to claim anyone careless enough to venture too close to the edge. Helena had never driven a wagon alone before. Her father had always handled such tasks, but pneumonia had taken him quickly, leaving her with few options but to press on to Silver Creek where her aunt lived. At 22, Helena was determined to make her own way, even if that meant facing the dangers of the frontier alone. The wagon wheels ground against loose rocks as she rounded a sharp bend. The horses whinnied nervously, sensing the danger before Helena did. A rattlesnake lay coiled in the center of the path, its warning rattle cutting through the still air. The horses reared in terror. "No!" Helena cried, pulling desperately on the reins. The horses' panic drove them sideways, and the right wheel of the wagon slipped over the edge of the path. For a heart-stopping moment, Helena thought they might recover, but then the full weight of the wagon shifted. The horses broke free from their harness as the wagon tipped further toward the precipice. Helena scrambled to jump clear, but her skirt caught on a nail. She yanked frantically at the fabric as the wagon began its descent down the steep slope. "Help! Somebody help!" she screamed, though she knew it was futile. This trail was rarely traveled, especially in the heat of midday. The wagon picked up speed, bouncing violently over rocks and bushes. Helena clung to the bench seat, her knuckles white. Her entire life, what little she owned in this world, was in this wagon, along with her father's body, which she intended to bury properly in Silver Creek. Just as the wagon hit a particularly large boulder, sending Helena airborne for a terrifying moment, she caught sight of a rider appearing as if from nowhere. The man urged his horse down the slope, racing parallel to the runaway wagon. Helena could barely make out his features through the cloud of dust, but she saw determination etched across his face. The man's horse was magnificent, a powerful black stallion that seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. They closed the gap to the wagon with remarkable speed. "Hold on!" the man shouted, his voice carrying over the rumble of the wheels and the cracking of wood. Helena watched in disbelief as he guided his horse alongside the wagon. In one fluid motion, the man leapt from his saddle onto the wagon bench beside her. His hat flew off, revealing sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. Without hesitation, he grabbed the reins that trailed uselessly beside the wagon. The leather straps burned through his palms as he wrapped them around his hands and pulled with all his might. "Get behind me," he ordered Helena, and she scrambled to comply, moving behind his broad shoulders. The man dug his heels into the floor of the wagon, muscles straining beneath his worn denim shirt as he fought against momentum and gravity. Helena could see blood beginning to seep through his fingers where the reins cut into his flesh, but still he held on, gradually applying more pressure. After what seemed like an eternity, the wagon began to slow. The front end dipped suddenly as they hit a small gully, nearly throwing both of them from the bench. But the man maintained his grip on the reins, using the natural formation to help slow their descent. With a final lurch, the wagon came to a stop at the bottom of the hill, One wheel broken and the frame tilted at a precarious angle, but intact enough that Helena's possessions remained secure. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Helena became aware of the man's labored breathing, the scent of leather and horses that clung to him, and the warmth of his body so close to hers. "Are you hurt?" he asked finally, turning to look at her with concern etched across his features. "No," Helena managed, her voice shaky. "Thanks to you. I don't know how to thank you properly, Mr. Fletcher." "Flynn Fletcher," he said, flexing his bloodied hands with a wince. "And no thanks necessary, Miss Sullivan." "Helena Sullivan," she replied, suddenly self-conscious of her dusty appearance and tangled hair. "You saved my life, Mr. Fletcher, and all my worldly possessions. I am deeply in your debt." Flynn shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. Any decent man would have done the same. He looked up the hill. "My horse will find his way down. He's too smart to stay up there without me for long." Helena followed his gaze. "Your horse seems as brave as his master." Flynn's cheeks colored slightly at the compliment. "Thunder's been with me since he was a colt. We understand each other." He looked back at the wagon. "Where were you headed alone on such a dangerous trail, Miss Sullivan?" "Silver Creek," Helena answered. "My father died 3 days ago. I'm going to stay with my aunt there." Flynn's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Sullivan." He glanced at the wagon. "Let me help you assess the damage. We might be able to repair it enough to get you to Silver Creek." As they climbed down from the wagon, Helena became acutely aware of how close she had come to death. Her legs trembled, and she stumbled slightly. Flynn's hand shot out to steady her, strong and sure despite his injuries. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "It's the shock," he said kindly. "Sit down for a moment while I check the wagon." Helena sank onto a nearby rock, watching as Flynn examined the broken wheel and damaged axle with practiced eyes. His movements were efficient and purposeful, and she found herself wondering about this man who had appeared from nowhere to save her. "The wheel is beyond repair," Flynn announced after a thorough inspection, "but I might be able to fashion something temporary to get us to town." He glanced at the sun's position. "It'll be dark in a few hours, though. We should make camp here for the night." Helena felt a flutter of nervousness at the prospect of spending the night alone with a stranger, even one who had saved her life. Proper etiquette dictated that unmarried women should never be unchaperoned in the company of men, but the frontier often made such social niceties impossible. "I wouldn't suggest it if there was another option," Flynn added, sensing her hesitation. "But we're still a good 15 miles from Silver Creek, and traveling these paths in the dark would be foolhardy." Helena nodded, recognizing the sense in his words. "Of course, Mr. Fletcher. I trust your judgment." Flynn's expression registered surprise at her easy acquiescence, then respect. "I'll gather some firewood. Your horses have likely headed back toward Silver Creek, but Thunder will be down soon. We can use some supplies from your wagon for dinner." As Flynn walked away to collect wood, Helena took stock of their situation. The wagon had come to rest in a small clearing, surrounded by pine trees and protected from the wind by a rocky outcropping. It could have been worse, she reflected. Much worse. By the time Flynn returned with an armful of wood, his horse Thunder had indeed found his way down the hill. The stallion nuzzled his master affectionately before moving to graze on the sparse grass nearby. Flynn built a fire with practiced ease, and Helena retrieved some beans, salt pork, and coffee from her supplies. As dusk settled over the clearing, they sat side by side before the crackling flames, the tension of the day's events gradually easing from their shoulders. "What brings you to these parts, Mr. Fletcher?" Helena asked, sipping the strong coffee. Flynn stared into the fire. I've been working as a ranch hand at the Blackwater spread for the past year. Before that, I was a bit of a drifter. And now I'm heading to Silver Creek too. Got an offer to work as foreman at the Rocking H Ranch. He smiled slightly. Good timing, I suppose. Helena nodded, watching the firelight dance across his features. Flynn Fletcher wasn't conventionally handsome, but there was something compelling about his face character in every line. Honesty in his direct gaze, strength in the set of his jaw. His hands, now bandaged with strips torn from his own shirt, spoke of years of hard work. You mentioned your father, Flynn said quietly. Was he ill long? Helena shook her head. Pneumonia. It took him quickly. She swallowed hard. We were on our way to Silver Creek to start fresh. He was going to open a carpentry shop. He was very skilled with wood. I'm sorry, Flynn said, and the genuine sympathy in his voice brought tears to Helena's eyes that she quickly blinked away. His body is in the wagon, she admitted softly. I couldn't bear to bury him on the trail away from family. My aunt loved him very much. They're siblings, you see. Flynn nodded in understanding. We'll get him to Silver Creek, Miss Sullivan. You have my word. They fell into companionable silence, the night sounds of the wilderness creating a soothing backdrop to their thoughts. When Helena yawned, Flynn immediately stood up. You should get some rest, he said. You can sleep in the wagon. I'll keep watch by the fire. Thank you, Helena said, suddenly exhausted. For everything, Mr. Fletcher. Flynn, he corrected gently. Out here, formalities seem a bit unnecessary, don't you think? Helena smiled. Then you must call me Helena. Flynn nodded, a warmth in his eyes that had nothing to do with the firelight. Good night, Helena. Good night, Flynn. Helena climbed into the wagon, making a small nest among her belongings. Despite the day's trauma, she felt strangely safe knowing Flynn Fletcher was keeping watch just outside. Sleep came quickly, deep and dreamless. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sitting up, Helena peered out of the wagon to find Flynn already up and cooking breakfast over a fresh fire. The early morning light cast a golden glow over the clearing, promising another hot day ahead. Morning, Flynn called, noticing her watching him. Hope you're hungry. We've got a long day ahead of us. Helena climbed down from the wagon, smoothing her rumpled dress as best she could and quickly pinning up her hair. You didn't have to cook, she said, approaching the fire. Flynn shrugged. Been up since dawn. Found a stream nearby and refilled our canteens. He handed her a tin plate of food. Eat up. I've been working on the wagon. Think I can get it mobile enough to reach town. Helena accepted the plate gratefully. You've been busy. Don't like to waste daylight, Flynn replied, sipping his coffee. How'd you sleep? Better than I expected, Helena admitted. Thank you for keeping watch. After breakfast, Flynn showed Helena his repairs to the wagon. He had fashioned a crude but functional replacement for the broken wheel using a section of log, reinforced the damaged axle with branches bound tightly with rope, and reattached the harness so that Thunder could pull the wagon. It won't be a smooth ride, Flynn warned, but it should hold until Silver Creek. You're remarkably resourceful, Helena observed, impressed by his handiwork. Flynn's mouth quirked into a half-smile. Frontier life teaches you to make do with what you have. They packed up camp efficiently, working together as if they'd done so many times before. Helena found herself watching Flynn when he wasn't looking, admiring the quiet competence with which he approached every task. There was something comforting about his presence, a steadiness she hadn't realized she'd been missing. The journey to Silver Creek was slow and jarring, with Thunder pulling valiantly and Flynn leading the horse on foot. Helena walked alongside, refusing Flynn's repeated offers to ride in the wagon. If you're walking, so am I, she insisted. It's my wagon, after all. Flynn didn't argue, but Helena caught the admiring glance he sent her way. They talked as they walked, learning about each other in the easy way of travelers sharing a journey. Flynn told her about growing up in Missouri, losing his parents to cholera when he was 16, and making his own way west. Helena shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her mother's death when she was 12, and her father's decision to seek a new life in Wyoming. He wanted adventure, Helena explained, a wistful note in her voice. He said the East was too settled, too predictable. And you? Flynn asked. Did you want adventure too? Helena considered the question. I wanted to be with my father. He was all I had left. But yes, I suppose part of me was excited by the idea of the frontier. The possibilities. Flynn nodded. The West is full of possibilities. Hard work too, but for those willing to put in the effort, there's freedom here you won't find back east. By mid-afternoon, they crested a hill and saw Silver Creek spread out before them, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley with a glittering creek running through it. Helena felt a surge of emotion at the sight, relief, mingled with sadness that her father would never see their destination. Almost there, Flynn said softly. The town grew larger as they approached, and Helena could make out details: a church steeple, the large general store, the blacksmith shop with smoke rising from its chimney. It was smaller than she had imagined, but seemed lively enough, with people moving about on the main street. As they entered Silver Creek, heads turned to observe the strange sight of their damaged wagon being pulled by a single horse. Flynn guided them toward the undertaker's establishment first, considerate of Helena's need to attend to her father. The undertaker, a solemn man named Mr. Perkins, helped Flynn carry her father's body inside while Helena provided the details for a proper burial in 2 days' time. "Your aunt is Martha Wilson, correct?" Mr. Perkins asked, consulting his ledger. Helena frowned. "No, my aunt is Harriet Sullivan. She lives here in Silver Creek." Mr. Perkins looked up, confusion etched across his features. "Miss, there's no Harriet Sullivan in Silver Creek. I've been here 20 years, know every soul in town." Helena felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "But that's impossible. My father received letters from her regularly. She invited us to join her here." Flynn stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on Helena's arm. "Maybe she's relatively new to town, or perhaps lives just outside the town proper." Mr. Perkins shook his head slowly. "Nearest Sullivan family is over in Cooperville, good 40 miles west of here." He gave Helena a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, miss." Helena stumbled outside, her mind reeling. Flynn followed close behind, concern evident in his expression. "This can't be happening," Helena whispered. "Where am I supposed to go now? What am I supposed to do?" "We'll figure it out," Flynn assured her, his voice calm and steady. "First, let's find lodging for you at the boarding house. Then we can start asking around town about your aunt." The boarding house was a neat 2-story building run by a plump, friendly widow named Mrs. Cooper. Flynn explained their situation, careful to emphasize the propriety of their arrangement despite having traveled together. "Poor dear," Mrs. Cooper clucked sympathetically, showing Helena to a small but clean room. "You rest up. We'll sort everything out." Over the next day, a grim picture emerged. Inquiries around town confirmed that no Harriet Sullivan had ever lived in Silver Creek. A visit to the post office revealed that no mail had ever been received for or sent by such a person. "I don't understand," Helena said, sitting across from Flynn at the town's small cafe. "Why would my father believe his sister was here?" The letters seemed so genuine. Flynn's expression was troubled. "I hate to suggest it, but is it possible someone was deceiving your father, perhaps for some reason?" Helena considered this disturbing possibility. "We did sell our house and business in Boston. Father converted everything to cash for our new start. A cold realization washed over her. The money was in the wagon, in a locked box beneath the seat. Flynn immediately stood. "Let's check if it's still there." They hurried to the livery where the wagon was being stored. The wooden box was indeed where Helena remembered, but when Flynn helped her pry it open, they found only a stack of blank paper where the money should have been. Helena sank to her knees, devastation washing over her. "We've been robbed. Everything is gone." Flynn knelt beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "When do you think it happened?" "It must have been while we camped on the trail before my father died," Helena said, her voice hollow. "I never checked the box. I assumed it was safe." Flynn helped her to her feet. "This changes things, but we'll figure it out, Helena. You're not alone." The day of the funeral arrived clear and bright, mocking Helena's dark mood. She stood beside her father's grave, dressed in her one black dress, as the pastor spoke words that seemed to float past her without meaning. Flynn stood beside her, respectfully hatless, his steady presence the only thing keeping her from collapsing. "He was a good man," Helena said quietly when the pastor asked if she wished to speak. "He only wanted a better life for us." Afterward, as they walked back toward town, Flynn cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about your situation." Helena looked at him warily. "Yes. The Rocking H needs a housekeeper. The owner, Mr. Howard, mentioned it yesterday when I met with him about the foreman position. It's not glamorous work, but it would provide room and board and a small wage to help you get back on your feet." Hope flickered in Helena's heart. "You think he'd hire me?" Flynn nodded. "I already spoke to him. He's willing to meet you this afternoon." Helena stopped walking, turning to face Flynn fully. "Why are you helping me like this? You've done so much already." Flynn's eyes met hers, steady and sincere. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because—" He hesitated. "Because I care what happens to you, Helena." The simple honesty in his words touched something deep inside her. In the few days they'd known each other, Flynn Fletcher had shown her more genuine kindness than most people she'd known for years. "Thank you," she said softly. That afternoon, Helena met with Mr. Howard, a gruff but fair-minded rancher in his 50s. He asked direct questions about her experience running a household and seemed satisfied with her answers. "Fletcher speaks highly of you," Mr. Howard said, stroking his gray beard thoughtfully. "Says you've got grit. That's important out here." He nodded decisively. "Job's yours if you want it. You'd live in the main house, have Sundays off, $20 a month plus room and board." It wasn't what Helena had imagined for her new life in Wyoming, but it was honest work and a chance to rebuild. "I accept, Mr. Howard. Thank you." The Rocking H Ranch lay 5 miles outside of Silver Creek, a sprawling operation with a handsome main house, several outbuildings, and vast grazing lands stretching toward distant mountains. Helena moved in the following day, bringing her few remaining possessions from the wagon. Flynn, as the new foreman, lived in a small cabin near the bunkhouse where the ranch hands stayed. They saw each other daily, their friendship growing stronger as they settled into their new roles. Helena found satisfaction in managing the household, cooking for Mr. Howard and organizing the domestic affairs of the ranch. 2 months passed quickly. Summer gave way to autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and spectacular colors to the surrounding landscape. Helena had earned the respect of everyone at the Rocking H with her hard work and quiet dignity. One crisp Sunday in October, her day off, Helena sat by the creek that ran through the property, sketching the landscape in a small notebook she'd purchased with her first wages. She didn't hear Flynn approach until he was nearly beside her. "You're quite talented," he said, looking over her shoulder at the drawing. Helena jumped slightly, then smiled up at him. "You startled me, And thank you, though it's just a hobby." Flynn sat beside her on the grass, respectful of proper distance but close enough that Helena could smell the clean scent of soap that clung to him. "I was thinking," Flynn began, unusually hesitant, "that since it's your day off, you might like to ride into town with me. There's a social at the church this evening." Helena looked at him in surprise. Was Flynn Fletcher asking to court her? The thought sent a flutter of excitement through her chest. "I'd like that very much," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Flynn's smile transformed his face, making him appear younger and more carefree than Helena had ever seen him. "I'll saddle up Daisy for you after lunch, then." The church social was lively, with most of the town in attendance. Tables laden with food lined one wall of the church hall, and a small group of musicians played cheerful tunes in the corner. Helena found herself genuinely enjoying the evening, especially the way Flynn stayed attentively by her side, introducing her to people he knew and ensuring her plate and cup were never empty. "You're quite popular," Helena observed as yet another rancher's wife stopped to chat with Flynn. He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "People are just being neighborly." "It's more than that," Helena insisted. "They respect you." Flynn's eyes met hers, something warm and unspoken passing between them. "Would you like to step outside for some air?" he asked. The night was clear, stars blazing in the black velvet sky above them. They walked slowly around the church, the music fading to a pleasant background murmur. "Are you happy here, Helena?" Flynn asked suddenly. At the rocking H, Helena considered the question. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," she said carefully. "Mr. Howard is a fair employer." "That's not what I asked," Flynn said gently. Helena sighed. "I'm content. It's not what I imagined when my father and I set out for Wyoming, but I'm making my way, building something new." Flynn nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You deserve more than contentment." They stopped walking, standing in the shadow of the church steeple. Helena could feel her heart beating faster as Flynn turned to face her fully. "Helena, I'm not a man of fancy words," he began, his voice low and earnest. "But these past months, getting to know you, seeing your strength and grace in the face of such hardship, I find myself thinking about you all the time." Helena's breath caught in her throat. "Flynn." He took her hand carefully, as if she might pull away. "I know it hasn't been that long, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I care for you deeply. I'd like your permission to court you properly, if you're willing." Joy bloomed in Helena's chest, bright and unexpected. In Flynn Fletcher, she'd found something she hadn't realized. She was seeking not just security or companionship, but a partner who saw her true self and valued it. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." Flynn's smile was radiant in the moonlight. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he leaned forward and placed the gentlest of kisses on her lips. It was brief, proper, and utterly perfect. The courtship progressed steadily through the winter months. Flynn visited Helena at the main house for Sunday dinners, took her on sleigh rides through the snow-covered landscape, and escorted her to every social event in Silver Creek. Mr. Howard observed their growing relationship with gruff approval, even adjusting their work schedules occasionally to allow them more time together. By spring, their feelings had deepened into love, though neither had spoken the word aloud. They had learned each other's stories, shared dreams, and built a foundation of trust that seemed unshakable. One evening in April, as wildflowers began to carpet the plains, Flynn asked Helena to join him for a ride to a special spot he wanted to show her. They traveled for about an hour, cresting a small hill to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley below, where the setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber. "It's beautiful," Helena breathed, dismounting from her horse. Flynn helped her spread a blanket on the grass, then sat beside her, unusually quiet. "Is something wrong?" Helena asked, noting his pensive expression. Flynn shook his head. "Just thinking about the day we met. How different my life might have been if I hadn't decided to take that mountain trail." Helena smiled at the memory. "You saved my life that day." "And you changed mine," Flynn replied softly. He took her hand, his expression growing serious. "Helena, I've been saving every penny I could from my wages. I've got enough now for a down payment on a small piece of land just north of Silver Creek. Good water, decent soil." Helena's heart began to race. "Your own ranch," Flynn nodded. "It would be modest to start. Just a small cabin, a few head of cattle, but there's room to grow." He paused, gathering his courage. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that I love you, Helena Sullivan. I've loved you since I watched you walk beside that broken wagon all the way to Silver Creek without a single complaint. You're the strongest, kindest woman I've ever known, and I want to build a life with you." Tears filled Helena's eyes as Flynn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small gold ring with a single pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Helena Sullivan, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Helena whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, Flynn Fletcher, I will marry you." Flynn slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, kissing her with a tender passion that spoke of promise and forever. They were married in the Silver Creek Church on a perfect day in June, with Mr. Howard giving the bride away and the entire town in attendance. Helena wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. After the ceremony, as they greeted well-wishers outside the church, Mr. Howard approached them with an envelope in his hand. "Wedding present," he said gruffly, pressing it into Flynn's hand. "Don't open it till you're alone." Later that evening, in the privacy of the small hotel room they'd rented for their wedding night, they opened the envelope to find the deed to 20 acres of prime grazing land, adjacent to the plot Flynn had already purchased. "A man should start married life with enough land to grow on," Mr. Howard had written on a note enclosed with the deed. "I can't believe it," Flynn said, stunned by the generosity. Helena slipped her arms around her husband's waist, resting her head against his chest. "It seems our luck has changed since that day on the mountain trail." Flynn tipped her chin up to look into her eyes. "It wasn't luck that brought us together, Helena. It was Providence." Over the following years, the Fletcher Ranch flourished under their combined determination and hard work. They built a comfortable home, expanded their herd, and earned a reputation for fair dealing and quality stock. 2 years after their wedding, Helena gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, followed 2 years later by a son they called James. Their family was complete, their happiness profound. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Flynn surprised Helena by adding a workshop onto their home, filled with woodworking tools similar to those her father had once used. "For your sketches," he explained as Helena explored the space in wonder. "So you can carve them into reality." Helena turned to her husband, love overflowing in her heart. "How did I get so fortunate to have you stop that wagon that day?" Flynn gathered her in his arms, his blue eyes as warm and steady as they'd been on that first perilous meeting. "I think we both got lucky that day. And I thank God for it every morning when I wake up beside you." As the sun set over their thriving ranch, painting the sky in the same golden hues as the day Flynn had proposed, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a runaway wagon on a dangerous mountain trail to a life built on love, hard work, and mutual respect, it was more than she had ever dared to dream. Flynn Fletcher had indeed grabbed the reins of her life when it seemed to be careening out of control. And together, They had built something beautiful and enduring in the wild heart of Wyoming.